Ask Alec.
Hey guys, it's Alex Torelli. Welcome to an episode of Ask Alec, where today I am covering the World Series of Poker and their new updates, canceling the November 9 in effect. For those of you who didn't know, there will not be a November 9 this year. The final table will be played literally one day after the final 9 are reached. They're going on a one-day break. I want to quickly update you with the procedure this year. It's a little bit different. This comes right from the World Series, basically starting in 2007, or excuse me, right from cardplayer.com, which took it from the World Series. Basically starting in 2007, the main event will feature live coverage on a 30-minute delay per gaming regulations in Nevada from day one of the main event, to be broadcast on ESPN and Poker Central. This year, the final table will resume only after one day off, which will allow for a final table preview show to be aired in order to familiarize the fans. They have essentially one day to do this. Then the final 9 will play down to a champion over the span of 3 days, like they did in previous years, from July 20th through the 22nd. ESPN and Poker Central have formed a new partnership regarding the WSOP and have so far agreed to a 4-year deal for this updated coverage model. So basically the biggest change is that they are not having the November 9. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the pros and cons and my thoughts about, whether I think this is good for poker or bad for poker, and some of the things that we can anticipate this year. Of course, we'll never know the results until after about how this will ultimately affect viewership and general interest in poker, but I think this should serve as some talking points and some things to keep in mind going forward. Of course, I'd love to hear from you guys. Your opinion really matters to me. I do read all my comments. Please leave me one after this video with your thoughts on how this will affect the November 9. First, I'd like to talk about the pros of this new coverage model. Number one, I think it's better for the more skilled players because, of course, the recreational players can no longer get coaching. This is the most obvious and probably the biggest impact of this within the poker community that I can see. Now, you might say, well, pros can't get coaching either, but you got to think, well, the incremental difference that a pro can achieve by studying tournament poker, something that he's already a specialist at, is very small. Whereas the learning curve for someone that has a rudimentary understanding of tournament poker in general, or that just reached the final table by happenstance, which has been known to happen at the main event, is massive. And if that person gets coaching, their ROI is going to increase, double or triple, whereas the pro might make an increase of 10 or 20%, right? Marginal gain after a long amount of time spent studying a given industry. So this is way better for pros because the amateurs are, blindsided. They have to go in with their same skill set. I also think it's better for the pros, or I don't want to say pros in general, but just the people in generally in better shape. I think stamina is maybe something that's understated in an event like this, the main event where you have to play maybe, 10 days with 0 days off, or now you have 1 day off. I think the final table, a lot of frankly, the older players might be a little bit fatigued, but also the players that are out of shape are definitely going to be feeling fatigue. So my approach to poker has always been stay healthy, get in good shape, and I think, poker being a mental sport and a mental game, you're going to see that matter more and more to get an edge at the final table. So I think overall this is a crushingly good improvement for the pros. I'm not saying that's good for poker. I'm just saying this is a group of people that highly benefit from this structure. I also think, in a way, it's kind of a pro that everyone will be there. I know it's kind of a pain in the ass for people from other countries, maybe to get visas or make trips to the US. And while, of course, they're going to have a lot of incentive to go back in November, it's sort of easier that everyone can plan their WSOP around one trip. Now, some of the cons to that, maybe the counter argument to that is, well, they're not going to have time to invite their rail. And I think historically, for the atmosphere of the WSOP, especially for the viewing audience, it really, having a rail and having time in between the final table and November 9 allowed people to invite, 20, 30, 50 people from their hometown and create these cheering sections, which people that watch sports are very familiar with. I think this is going to be largely omitted during the final table in July because, if I make the final table, I have 1 day to invite 40 people to come cheer for me. It's just not realistic for most people. It's just simply not going to happen. So I'm curious to see the atmosphere at the final table, who's going to show up, number one, and if there are these very clear cheering sections for the different types of players. So I think it's easier for the players to get there, but I think it's perhaps at the same time a con that we're not going to have that culture at the final table that you perhaps have seen in past years. I think it's also a con that there isn't going to be as much opportunity for external sponsors to latch on to the WSOP, simply because the players are not going to have time to negotiate sponsorship contracts with people or brands that are outside the final table. This might be not a huge issue, but I think getting brands and external people outside of poker, interested in the main event, because of the long sort of build-up that you had with these 4 months between July and November, is a good thing for poker. It's a good thing for the players that could potentially get sponsors, and it's a good marketing leverage to attract external brands to the final table. And I think that is largely going to be lost as well. I mean, you only have a day in between. It's going to be very hard to negotiate sponsors that are coming in at the last minute. Now, it might not be a huge thing, but worth mentioning nonetheless. Now, on to perhaps the elephant in the room. The biggest subject is viewership, right? How is this going to affect viewership? Is this good for the poker industry as a whole? Truth be told, I really don't know. I mean, streaming poker is blowing up. I mean, Twitch is getting big. People are even streaming on YouTube and Facebook. I mean, there's so many. The Indian Poker Tour, the Poker Sports League in India, where I am right now, where I'm filming this video in India, is all streamed on Facebook Live, right? So the entire event is streamed there. Now, I think that poker and people watching poker are very used to this format, and the poker community is definitely going to jump on board, and I think they're going to have the entire poker audience watching on Poker Central or wherever it's going to be streamed. But the real question is, what's going to happen to the general public, the people that might not have the interest to stream it live and watch in real time on their computer and spend 8 hours a day grinding watching the WSOP. What's going to happen to the casual viewer that could have seen it on a major television publication or just watch reruns at their leisure? Now, I have to think that audience is going to be lost a little bit, and that is overall a con in my opinion, because you have the poker audience cornered no matter what. The poker ardent enthusiast is going to watch the main event regardless, right? He's not going to make his decision based on where it's being aired. He's just going to watch. Who we're really trying to attract, and what we're really trying to do by growing the industry of poker through the main event, is attract an audience that's sort of interested or that might not watch otherwise. And that, I think, is still in our culture today, with the demographic of people we're targeting, happens largely on primary television. Now, I think long term, 10 years down the line, if it lasts that long, this coverage, I think it's maybe going to be fine, 10 or 15 years, where it's more ubiquitous, that the streaming model is much more ubiquitous, and people are generally accustomed to consuming content digitally on their computers and their smartphones, etc., rather than on conventional television, excuse me. So I think long term, this is probably a good play, and I think a lot we're going to see outside of poker. I think we're might even going to see more things, more events moving towards live streaming on specific platforms dedicated to that coverage. We might see this in more sports. We might see this in even major television. Might all shift to the internet at some point down the line, or a lot of it. So I think this is the first step in that direction. It could be a good long-term play. I think short-term it sort of hurts us, though. I think there's so much attention to be had on mainstream television, especially in the audience we're trying to target. And I'd be very interested to see how this develops. And I know the entire poker community will be paying close attention. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Leave me your feedback and your thoughts and ideas in a comment below. I would love to hear them, and pros and cons of this, and what you guys think as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on Ask Alec. Take it easy. Cheers.